What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Trey Griggs here, Beta Consulting Group. And we're here for another episode of Standing Out, episode number 227. But listen, we are on the heels of last week. What happened last week? You might be asking. Well, we were at the TIA Capital Ideas Conference and Exhibition down in Orlando, Florida, hanging out with over 1,900 logistics professionals. It was absolutely incredible. If you didn't go this year, you got another shot next year. 2024 will be in Phoenix. And you can go to tianet.org/meetings to learn all about that. Be sure to follow on LinkedIn, though, and follow as we're going to be kind of dropping some things from time to time from that show. I'll tell you the biggest thing I took away was the spirit of collaboration. It is exciting to see freight brokers who are working together to solve problems in the industry. And it's exciting to see tech companies working together to solve problems in the industry. So it was a great show, great time to be there. Had a lot of fun, played a little golf, may have gotten burnt, and probably stayed up way past my bedtime. But we had a great time, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of network connections were made. Business was happening, and there were some movers and shakers there, so it was great. Also, when you get a chance, when you're out serving the old internet, make sure you go to betaconsultinggroup.com and see how we are helping companies with their messaging. How are you talking to your customers and to your prospects? The words are so important. They're so critical, and we'll help you out with that. So click on the little button there to schedule a 15-minute call with moi, and we'll have a great conversation to hear who you want to talk to and what do you want to say to them. Also, want to give a shout out to our new sponsor, as you see in the upper right-hand corner of the broadcast today. SPI Logistics is the leading logistics firm in North America with a respected network of 65 offices and 60,000 carriers throughout Canada and the United States. If you're a freight broker needing back office support such as admin, finance, IT, and sales, at SPI Logistics, they have the technology systems and back office support to help you succeed. To learn more, simply go to success.spi3pl.com. If you're a freight broker and want to get out of that space, that's a great company to talk to. Or if you're thinking about becoming an agent and going out on your own, highly recommend you talk to Mike and the crew over there at SPI. Great guys over there, and thank you for sponsoring the show. All right. It is time to bring our guest today. I am so excited about this because we've talked about this a lot offline. We've talked about trust and brand building and all those things that go into it. So please welcome to the show my good friend from Kansas City and the founder and CEO of TrustCentric Consulting, Cory Scheer. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
Hey, Trey. Well, I gave you full authority to pick my theme music, and you guys knocked it out of the ballpark. As always.
You can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with the Ted Lasso thing. You just can't. It's just kind of the way it works. How are you, my friend? It's good to see you again.
I'm doing great. I'm just across the state from you, but we're in the same I-70 corridor, so it's good to see you, and always great to be connected with you, Trey.
Practically across the street, as I think you were saying there. I mean, we're really close. Only a couple of 3.5 hours away. Before we talk about what we're going to talk about today, are you going to go to the draft on Thursday? It's in Kansas City for the first time ever. The NFL draft is at Union Station in Kansas City. Are you going? Are you watching? Could you care less?
Okay, so I am not going. I drove by it today, and the canopy, the tent over, in the Union Station area, It's massive. So I'm not going to go. I have no choice but to watch it. If I turn on the television for 1 second, it will be about the draft because it's been about the draft for the last 4 weeks. So yes, I will be watching it, but I will not be there in person.
See, I like this, and I don't know if the NFL, I don't think they plan this at all, but I actually like it rotating to cities. I think they're going to keep doing that. I think it should be in the Super Bowl winning team city the following year. I know they can't coordinate in 2 months, so that probably won't work, but like the next year. So I think it should be in Kansas City again in 2024. That's what I think.
They got pretty lucky to have it fall in the same year that they won the Super Bowl. That was like striking gold. So they did a good job.
That really was quite impressive. I will be watching it. I won't be able to go. I wanted to come in, but just can't get in there. But I'll be watching. We have 12 picks, everybody. The Chiefs, who won the Super Bowl, have 12 picks in 7 rounds. Our GM, Brett Veach, is absolutely amazing. All right. That's not what we're here to talk about, though. What we're here to talk about, a couple of things. First of all, I just love being your friend. Number one, love our conversations. We get to talk offline a lot about brand, about trust, and about all those things in regards to that. I can't even remember exactly how we met. I think we were introduced through a friend from Jewel, a mutual friend from Jewel.
Yep, Tom Eisenhower.
It's Tom Eisenhower. That's right.
And then I hopped on a podcast a few months ago, and so that began a regular conversation that you and I just continued dialogue about the importance of brand and trust and trusted brands and everything that goes along with that.
That's right. But before we do that, you're now a full-time entrepreneur. You were part-time and now you're full-time. You made the leap from having your day job and having your side hustle to now your side hustle is your main hustle. How does that
Yeah.
feel? What is it like? Let's talk about that.
It has been, well, thank you for asking, and thank you for your encouragement and support along the way, because I've got a really close network of people, of individuals that I trust them that have been so supportive as I've made the jump and the leap into this world of being a full-time entrepreneur and a small business owner. And I thought going from full-time plus a side gig to a full-time side gig there'd be all sorts of extra time in the day. And what I found actually to be quite the opposite, that it's been very full, very busy, but really rewarding, and super thankful for that and learning a ton. A good friend of mine shared with me some, I think, sound wisdom as an entrepreneur, that it's basically a fool's errand to look for rhythm in your day, in your week, in your month. You can look and look and look. You're probably not ever going to find it. So just embrace it, roll with it, and do the very best you can every day. So I think we can build constraints and a framework around it, but trying to find that consistent daily, weekly rhythm, I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, it's kind of what you sign up for when you go into entrepreneurship. But you know what? Entrepreneurship to me is like a bunch of middle school boys and girls that are like on the top of a cliff and they're about to jump into the river, but it's a little scary. Like, I don't know, I can't do it. But the moment that you jump and you realize that you're safe and it's fun, you want to not only do it again,
Yeah.
but you want to encourage everybody else to do it as well. So when I think about our introductions and getting a chance to meet, of course I'm encouraging you to be an entrepreneur, to go all in, because I understand the benefits and the blessings, and you're just one of those guys that has it in you. You've got a vision, you want to go somewhere with it, and so it's really exciting to see you take off. And I'll say, if they're going to write a book about entrepreneurship, they should write it about what you've done. You've done it the right way. You've done a lot of good things, created a lot of partnerships. You've taken your time, but now you're launching full steam, and it's exciting to see you do well. So that's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Really enjoying it.
All right, so let's talk about trust. See, this is interesting. I'm about building brand, and when you and I met, and you said, "Hey, I'm about building trust," and as we started talking, we started to realize it's kind of synonymous. In order to build a really healthy brand, you have to build trust, and I think vice versa is true. Talk about when you realized that trust really was probably one of the most critical elements of an organization.
Well, I've read a lot of books, leadership books. There's a lot of conversation around trust, and there are books that allude to it and even talk about trust as being foundational, which is true. But when I began a lot of my research many, many years ago, and then the corresponding interviews and conversations with leaders and organizations after that, I just realized that trust was something that was oftentimes, it was more philosophical and ethereal, a little bit more kind of squishy. People, they had a difficult time defining it and putting handholds to it to where they could do something with it to make it actionable. And over and over and over, I learned from leaders that they could always articulate why trust was important, but it was more difficult for them to articulate, how do we tactically do this to where we can make a difference and move the needle forward and utilize an empirically proven framework to help guide us, and then assessment data to be able to hold us accountable along the way. So after many, many years of those types of conversations, I just felt like there was an opportunity to dig in and to roll up my sleeves and to make that really the focus and the mission of my organization, which is to help organizations assess and take action with trust. And put maybe more simply, I really try to help organizations start with trust, because it has to be foundational. So the question is, how do you do that? And that's what we try to help with.
Yeah, well, let's just back up for a minute, because I do think some people that are watching might be like, well, I mean, how would you even define trust? How would you quantify trust? It's almost like momentum. Like, sometimes you don't necessarily know what it is or how to explain it, but you know when you have it. And I think that some people view trust in a similar way, but you take a different approach. You really believe that there is an empirical way to view trust, to understand trust, and to start building trust. Dig into that just a little bit more and talk about exactly how that works.
Yeah. So what the definition that I use often when I talk about trust is that trust is the firm belief in the truth of something. And so every single word is very, very important in that sentence, the firm belief in the truth of something. And the other thing
I
is,
like
is
that. I don't think I've heard that before. That's a good one.
yeah,
I like that.
it's a great definition. It's super helpful. And then the other thing is that when we think, if we thought about trust in terms of a framework or a construct, or I refer to it as a structure. There is an actual structural element of trust to where we can break it down into a few different critical, what I would call building blocks. Those 3 building blocks, and Trey, you and I have talked about this a lot, but the 3 building blocks of every trusted relationship: competency, problem solving, care for others. It's empirically proven that these are the 3 building blocks, thanks to some incredible researchers 20 years ago that looked at this through the lens of the retail and the airline industry. And what they found in their search for how value is created in relational exchanges, they found that the primary ingredient to create value is actually a structural understanding of trust. And it's those 3 things: competency, problem solving, and care for others. And when one or multiple of those is missing, that's where you start to see a breach in trust. And so then when I did the national research with a good friend of mine named Kurt Bartolich, he works for a company called Brand Certain. And when we did this research, we found some pretty staggering statistics about what I would call an epidemic of distrust across all industries. 2 quick data points on that. The first one: 51% of employees do not have a high level of trust for their leaders. So I call that the half-life of distrust. And then the next thing that is staggering is this gap in trust that occurs between leaders and frontline employees or individual contributors. And that gap in trust on average is about 31%. So imagine taking that gap or negating your overall effect as an organization by 31% and now apply that to all of your KPIs. And that's why we see things like casual Mondays, quiet quitting, the great resignation, toxic work environments. These are all of the contributing factors. And it's because we have a gap and a lack of understanding about the structural, tactical elements of trust.
Okay, so let's dig into this gap idea real quick, because I want to make sure everybody catches this. So when you talk about a gap in trust, what you're saying is your frontline employees believe that a trust level is X. Your leadership believes that a trust level is Y. And
Yes.
we're talking about the delta between those two, where there's not an alignment there. That's
right.
what the gap is, correct?
That's the gap. And you are correct in moving the Y above the X, meaning the leaders always think that their organization is more trustworthy than it actually is. And typically, frontline employees, they're going to be much, much lower. And this is where no matter if you have really strong indicators in other areas like revenue or maybe some of the other indicators efficiency that you measure, if there is something that is occurring under the surface where their gap is wide or getting wider, that is going to be trouble downstream as it relates to the value proposition and the loyalty of your employees and your customers.
Yeah, and this gap, it's not a figment of your imagination. It's not a philosophical discussion. There's empirical data, because you have an assessment that organizations take that then show you this gap. Talk about the assessment that you provide to companies, which I would think it's more beneficial to the leadership, of course, but it's also beneficial for the entire company to understand what these basic building blocks of trust. Correct?
It really is. And it's very different than an employee satisfaction survey or even a net promoter score. Employee satisfaction and net promoter score, they tend to measure things a little bit later on in the process. So they're after the fact. Whereas what we try to do with our organizational trust assessment is to move the assessment as far upstream as possible and try to identify some of the root causes of where trust might be breaking down in each of those different 3 building blocks. And so the survey itself, it takes about 7 minutes for employees to take. It's open to any employee in the organization if the leadership wants it to be. It's completely anonymous. I don't even collect email addresses, so I have no idea who it's coming from. And then what I do is I generate a 7-page report. It's got 44 data points as we look at all of the various angles of trust within the organization. And then we move from the assessment, and then we now start applying this framework called the structure of trust. And then once we apply the structure of trust from an educational and a training standpoint, we can then build a blueprint for strengthening organizational trust. So that's my process: is we assess, we then apply the framework, and then we take action by building a blueprint.
I love that. It's not some kind of pie in the sky idea or some consultant coming in just giving your opinion. You obviously have an opinion, but you're really looking at the empirical data for each organization through this assessment, and then some actionable items that they can do. I know that you worked with our team on this, and it was really eye-opening, because when you talk about those building blocks of trust, one of them has to do with are you actually competent at what you're doing? Are you good at what you do? And I think about this from a business standpoint. If I'm offering a service, I'm not really competent. Eventually, that will get found out, and that actually erodes trust with the customers that I have. And the opposite is true. If I'm really competent, that leads towards more trust from a building block perspective. But it's also true internally. If I'm competent as a leader, as a manager, then that's going to build trust in the organization. If I'm not competent, that's going to show up as well. And that's where you see these organizations are like, my leader's an idiot, my manager's a jerk, blah, blah, blah. Some of those sentiments that people have about leadership, it's because they may not actually be competent. There may be a training gap as well, but you can figure these things out through the assessment.
We can assess that, and then also on the opposite side of that, you may hire the most competent technical individual that you could ever hire, and maybe they're even a really good problem solver, and they can focus in and dig in and really create clarity around what the problem is and then how to solve it. But if that third building block, if they don't care, if they don't show a demonstration of care for others, it is going to break down. It will erode trust. It's kind of like the Dwight Schrute symptom, the symptom of a Dwight Schrute, or where you've got this person who is.
Are you saying that Dwight Schrute is not a trustworthy leader? Is that what you're saying?
He is incomplete in his trustworthiness. He's a really good paper salesperson. I mean, he is the assistant to the regional manager.
Assistant to the regional manager. That's good.
He solves the problems that are related to the competency required, but as it relates to caring for others, he's terrible about it. And so as a result of that, he is going to erode trust, which of course he does through every episode and every season of The Office.
I love it. On our other brand podcast of Word on the Street, we actually have the Office theme. I was so hoping we had it here and I could have just started to play it. That would have been epic, but didn't work out. But I think you're right. I mean, you have to assess all of those. Is there one that tends to be stronger than the other of those three?
Yeah. So what the research shows, it's a great question. Generally speaking, across all of our industries that we've measured, competency tends to come in at the highest, then problem solving, and typically the most undervalued and underappreciated is care for others. And so, which is interesting because, it depends also as you think about the type of industry you're in. I work with a lot of school districts and nonprofit organizations. Of course, I work with corporations as well, but it is interesting how sometimes the emphasis of each of those building blocks changes depending on the industry, but categorically across the board, care for others is the one area that tends to be the weakest. And the number one way to strengthen trust in that building block of care for others is to listen actively to people. It's not employee of the month. It's not employee parking spots. It's not $10 movie tickets. It's not gas cards. It's listening actively to your employees. And when you do that, you are employing the most important way in order to build trust in that building block through caring for others, through active listening. So that's where the power of the data actually tells us what we can do. It becomes a mirror that we can look into, but then also a bit of an X-ray that we can start to diagnose and do something with the data.
So if we were just to look at The Office for a moment and compare Dwight Schrute, Jim Halpern, and Michael Scott, yes. Those three in leadership. Michael is the incompetent one who cares.
Well, I think he only cares for himself. Actually,
That's think true.
He fails on all three of those.
He probably,
Jim.
Does, right.
So Jim is the nicest person in the office, except for Dwight. He's not very competent, and he causes all sorts of problems on purpose. Jim is actually the hardest person in an organization to fire because everybody loves him.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Dwight, we just talked about. Now, the beauty about The Office is I think the most trustworthy individual, most competent, best problem solver, highest care for others, it's Pam. She is the person that
keeps that place running.
She demonstrates that. And then, of course, early in The Office, she is given a lower level of authority, but then she gets promoted and moves into higher levels of authority. So It is a very good case study in the demonstration of lack of trustworthiness or trustworthiness.
I'm seeing a blog on your website soon coming on about this. This could be kind of a fun blog to talk about that.
I need to get a Dunder Mifflin shirt, I think.
I think you should. That could be awesome. You talk about listening, how important that is. My good friend Jason Lippert over at Lippert Components out of Elkhart, Indiana, a CEO of a company that's $6 billion in annual sales. They make parts for RVs and for boats. But something really interesting is their leadership journey. They have 16 people on staff whose job is leadership development. That's all they do. They go to the leaders, they go to the managers, they make sure that they're growing, that they're challenging them, you're holding them accountable, that they're training them. All those things are really important. And one thing that Jason does that's really good is every month he goes to one of their plants. They've got about 70 plants around the world, probably 30 here in the United States. He'll go to their plants and he'll have a town hall discussion, and he'll just listen to the employees. What's good? What's working? What do they enjoy? What would they prefer to have? What would be really nice? And he listens. And that's a huge part of his leadership and leadership development there at Lippert. So shout out to Jason, but it goes right along with what you're saying, that scheduling time just to listen, have one-on-ones and just listen is really important. It's something that I'm working to grow at as a leader as well, is making sure that that's an important thing, that I'm not just giving orders, but that I'm actually listening and really seeing how people are and how they're doing in life, how they're doing on the job, where they could use some help. All those things are really, really critical. So I absolutely love that. Okay, one more thing before we have a little fun. You have a new online course. Tell us about this online course. You recorded it over several days, I'm sure. I think it's 60 minutes of content in total, broken down into 6 sessions. Talk a little bit about that and why you did that.
Yeah, it's actually, so it is 6 sessions. It's actually a little bit longer. It's about 90 minutes. So 15 or so, 12 to 15 minute chunks. And you can find it if you go to www.structureoftrust.com. So structureoftrust.com, that's where you can find the class. The reason why I did the online course is because in that research, that gap of leadership trust, or of trust between leaders and frontline employees, I really felt compelled and was challenged by a couple of people to create a resource that would be applicable and accessible by any employee within an organization, whether it's C-suite or part-time frontline employee, a new employee, whatever the case may be. And so we built the course in such a way that it is accessible by any employee. There are questions at the end of each of the modules so that you can have a supervisor or a manager help facilitate the conversation, or it can be watched on its own, whatever the case may be, or of course, utilized by various leaders within the organization. And so we partnered with Intrepid Creative, which is a video company here in Kansas City. They're incredible. And we knocked this course out, and now it is up and ready for consumption. And people are utilizing it in their own workplace. They're contextualizing it to some of the challenges that they're facing. And so, yeah, if you're interested, structureoftrust.com is where you can find that.
Love that. We got that up on the screen right now so people can see that. We'll put that in the show notes as well. And I believe I have a coupon code, I think. Do I have a coupon code for this?
You do, and it is Beta Consulting, and you get some money off of that.
Get a little discount. That's exciting. Yes. We'll have to. I wasn't as prepared. I should have been more prepared, but we'll be sure to put that in the notes as well.
Yes.
There's a little coupon code for those who go to structureoftrust.com and sign up for the class, and use that coupon code Beta Consulting to get a little discount and enjoy that. I love it, man. I'll tell you, one thing I love about working with you is that when you say you're gonna do something, you just do it. You just get it done, and it's fun to be around doers. Who don't wait around, who just get things done. So really pushes me to get better and to keep going and all that. So I really appreciate that as well.
Thank you, Trey.
All right, my friend, we got to have a little fun. As you know, on the show, or maybe I don't know if you know or not, but we like to celebrate national days around here. Some are goofy, some are pretty normal, but we like to celebrate those. Do you know what today's national day is?
Well, in Kansas City, it's National Draft Day and Kansas City Day, but I don't think that's the actual official day.
I think we even have an introduction video for this. Let's play that. That should be... It is National Telephone Day. There you go. You got yours. I got mine. It's so funny how this is something that fundamentally hasn't changed what we're doing, communicating with another person, but in reality has changed dramatically. What is the oldest telephone that you remember using, maybe growing up or in an antique shop, or like actually using, like not just what's the oldest phone?
Yeah, I remember, of course I remember the wall phones, but I remember the handheld phones that were, smaller, that were like this. But I remember the pulse dial where it was like tick, 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 tick every time you dial the number, like the pulse dial.
A rotary? Did you ever use a rotary?
I used a rotary. We didn't have one of those in my house, but it was always that pulse dial. And I still remember my childhood phone number, 635-6459. Like, it is ingrained in my mind. So yeah, it's amazing how much these devices have shaped who we are as a culture. So I think it deserves its own national day. Absolutely.
I think you're right. It's one of those devices that is revolutionized. But it's funny, remembering my home phone number, I think it was 358-7277, I think was my number there in Raytown. It's amazing how I was telling somebody this recently. Back in the day, we would have 40 phone numbers memorized in our head. All of our
Oh,
friends,
yeah.
we knew every friend's phone number, our
Yes.
phone number, of course, of probably a few others, like our favorite, place to go, or maybe that whatever. We had a ton of phone numbers in our head, and now I don't even know my daughter's phone number. How bad
Yeah,
is
as long you
this?
just have to find your phone. I mean,
It's
it's yeah,
terrible,
yeah,
but it's
so true.
revolutionized everything. That is absolutely for sure. I heard a joke one time that somebody said that if they went back 100 years from now, just like went back to 1920 and told them about how phones work, nobody would believe us because I don't even know how this thing works. Like, how does it work? I don't know. I think there's a
Yeah,
satellite or something. I don't know.
and it's so much more than a phone. Obviously, it's
It's
everything, but
crazy. Yeah, yeah. The phone
and
is the
now can you
least
imagine
gas on the phone.
somebody sitting at a stoplight with, like a full-on rotary phone? Like, it sounds so ridiculous, but people do it all the time, right?
I
So,
took my kids to an antique shop and showed them a rotary phone, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you had to do this every time." And if you messed up, hang up, try it again,
that's right.
start over.
That's
Man, it
exactly
was
right.
a different life back then. Okay, so that's a national day, National Telephone Day. That's pretty cool. That's a good day.
Yeah.
Don't mind doing that. It's interesting because around the world there's 9.8 billion mobile phones. I don't know if you know this. 9.82 billion mobile phones.
Wow.
And interestingly, a lot of people thought that the landline would become obsolete because of this. But even in 2020, this is the last time they checked, there were 931 million landlines still in
Wow.
play around the world. Probably a lot of businesses, I bet, but
Probably,
quite a
yeah.
few
People
landlines.
still holding out. These
Yeah,
are and that's
some
okay.
holding out.
It still works.
I've owned two houses and I've covered the landline in both of them. Like I've took them out of the wall and puttied over them because I'm like, I'm not using that
Yeah,
again.
that's right. Yeah, it's
Don't
pretty
even use
wild.
it. I know it's pretty crazy. Okay, so National Telephone Day, everybody. Enjoy that. If you've got a good telephone at home, an antique, take a picture of it and throw it in the comments. Love to see that. Also, it's random question time. We like to do this. So today's random question of the day is. Okay, all right. How do you balance work life and home life? How do you balance work life and home life? Well, we're both new entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I'll let you take a shot at this first.
Well, that's easy. I don't try to do that. Because
Well, tell me
it's
what you mean. Let's talk about it.
yeah, well, obviously my office is now in my home. This goes with us wherever we go. I think it's more, instead of balance, the goal I think is a little bit just more reasonable constraints, and making sure that I'm mindful of whatever the day holds, ensuring that I'm allocating enough time to do the work that I need to do. But then, of course, most importantly, spending time with my wife and my family. And then when things get a little bit out of balance, ensuring that I'm just communicating as clearly as possible. So one very tactical way that I do that, on Monday morning of every week, I take a screenshot of my calendar and I send that to my wife, just so she has
Oh,
full line of sight into how my schedule is kind of blocking out for the week. And then we communicate with each other about that. Of course, it's going to change throughout the week, but that's just a very practical way where I invite her into the reality of my week, and then we're able to talk about that and then balance accordingly.
I like that. That's actually a great tip. I need to start doing that. We do something similar, but not quite to that level. We have a family calendar. And every Sunday night, or maybe Saturday night, if we know Sunday night's going to be busy, but every weekend, essentially, we take a look at that calendar and start planning out, okay, who's got to be where, who's taking who there,
Yeah.
when are we going to get a little extra sleep, when are we going to lose little sleep, who's making dinner what night. So we try to get on the same page as a family and do that. But I think you're right. It's very much an integrated life.
It
And
is.
sometimes it requires a little bit extra. Sometimes it requires a little bit less. Some nights I need to grab my computer and sit down on the couch with them and pound out just a couple of things real quick, which I hate to do, but sometimes I need to do that. Other
Yes.
times, like last night, my daughter didn't have homework. I didn't have work. We sat down and watched a movie after dinner, and it was great. We just had a really good time. So, I
Yeah,
think you're right. It's not exactly work balance. It's more integration.
it is one of the. I try to hard stop my laptop time at around 6 p.m. at night.
Yeah,
To your
5 for
point,
me.
sometimes I just have to hop on, but I just try to shut it and put it away. It can wait for me until the next morning. I'm an early
Yeah,
riser, so if I'm not done by 6 p.m., I'm like, I just need to take a break anyways. But
yeah.
those are just the practical things that we can try to implement, and know that there's grace there, and we can make changes, and we just need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and those that are closest to us, of course.
Yeah, yeah. My shutdown time is 5, and unless something is time sensitive, I wait till the kids go to bed or to the next morning to
Yeah.
jump back on my computer. But if there's something that I've got to get done by a certain time and I'm a little behind, that's the only time I make the exception to that rule. And my kids have actually vocally appreciated that. that I've been shutting it down. And so, life goes on. It'll be there tomorrow.
Right.
It's not going anywhere.
That's
That's
exactly
for
right.
sure. That's for sure. Well, Cory, listen, man, I'm excited, for what you're doing. I'm excited for some of our partnerships. We got some things that we're going to announce down the road, some workshops we're going to do, and some other things we're going to do together. I'm so excited about that. And it's just good to see you, doing well and, making some strides and what's going on. And thanks again for being on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Trey. Really appreciate it. Good to see you and great to spend time with you today.
We'll talk to you soon. And everybody else, listen up. Oh, yeah, there we go. We're out of here. We'll talk to you guys real soon. We'll see you on the next episode coming up shortly.